you might be aware of a little video I dropped the other day. I made a video about the huge pivot change. Because of the pivot rules, essentially when you make a pivot, some models have a pivot value of 0, which is basically models on a round base, and monster vehicles, unless they overhang, have a pivot value of 2. Okay, how you used to move tanks and how you move tanks now is very different. So essentially when you measure to move a tank, you measure from the middle all the time. And what this means is when you pivot, you spend inches to pivot. So for example, this model, you keep measuring from 1 point to 1 point, etc. Unless you want to pivot, then you measure from the center. If you're round, you don't pay any pivot value, you just spin as much as you like. The point is pivot is a big thing. And the big change in the video, if you haven't seen it, is the fact that raiders, for example, have a pivot value of 0. When they charge, they can turn first during the charge move. So when they roll, they go, I've rolled a 7, so I turn and gain 2 inches, and then I just charge, you know? And my God, did this video cause such an outrage. Like, there's like 200 comments. Only, I would say, like 10% are like people going, that this seems like a good idea. The rest of it is people saying, actually you can't turn during the charge. It costs, if you're 908, it costs 9 to charge. A lot of the comments gave me the vibe that the people commenting didn't actually know how the rules work. Some people didn't understand how new pivoting works, which obviously it's new. Some people, for lack of a better term, the basic concept of charging. I was like trying to like explain it to people, and just people just like all capsing but telling me I was wrong, right? Important question. At what point are you allowed to rotate your model? As under the assumption, you can only move in the movement phase and charge phase. If you go to charge in the charge phase, you have to make the charge first. So wouldn't you have to roll a 9 before you can pivot? And if you come in deep strike, you'd be 9 inches out. Also, doesn't deep strike reinforcements come at the end of the movement phase, so you wouldn't be allowed to move? For lack of a better term, just like very basic, what I would say is like basic understanding of the rules being lost. I think there's like a weird mismatch of people playing tournament games and playing casually, right? I think people want to play a lot of tournament games, but also people want to play casually, and I feel like they cross over way too much. Ultimately, if you're looking for a casual game, you should get a casual opponent. If you're looking for a competitive game, you should get a competitive opponent. Because a lot of people start saying is like, the rules change too much for me to compete, keep up or whatever. Like Non-Queen Kaya said, 8th was really easy to get people into the game itself. 9th and 10th have been far more difficult. I know that's not just my experience, because people argue with me online about Warhammer, often they're citing 8th edition. Game is both long and complex. It's a lot for onlookers. And they also said to say it's strange too, because 10th isn't perfect. My best guess is the rules change far too often, and it throws people off. I was helping a newbie in Discord yesterday about CSM just to find out they're using index rules still. A lot of people basically saying it's really hard to keep up. Ultimately, people don't need to keep up. I think there's like a level of making it okay to play a game that's not been FAQ'd, or like not had an FAQ for a while, playing a version of the game from like a year ago if you play only once every couple of months. If you play once every 4 months, is it that big of a deal? Is it that big of a deal that you're not playing the most up-to-date thing? Like, and again, I'm not trying to sit on a soapbox and say, this is what I think and you should agree with me. Is it fundamentally necessary for you to enjoy 40k to play the most up-to-date version of the game if you only play once a year? I'm trying to understand like the mindset and like why. For me, that's just like obvious what to do, but I'm asking that question, you know what I mean? I'm gonna follow on this conversation with, is it too complex? Is that the issue? People want to be playing properly, and Games Workshop have presented the competitive tournament meta as the most up-to-date version, and therefore properly. Like, honestly, yeah, I totally agree. I agree with this comment about playing properly, you know, which leads me on to, is the game too complex? Because the thing is with Warhammer, or 40k in particular, the rules are released physically and then they are updated very quickly, which is obviously like good, because in my opinion, as someone who plays all the time, I want an up-to-date game. However, 3 months ago, there was also a video by my good friend, who I've only spoken to on Twitter. My good friend, Goober Town Hobbies. You obviously all know Goober Town Hobbies. Casual Warhammer player. Okay. They released a video called 40k. Warhammer 40k is not for casual players. And I thought we could take a look, and I could maybe learn about people who play casually. Like, because the thing is with it is, again, I'm silly competitive 40k YouTuber. I'm out of touch because I'm always up to date. I spend every day in forums, in Discords, talking about competitive 40k, right? Whether it's my Discord or someone else's, whether it's a Reddit post that I made or someone else's. I'm in it all the time because I'm constantly looking for videos to make. I'm constantly looking for like interesting topics. Not everybody is, you know, people have jobs and whatever. Jobs, families, etc. They don't play all the time. But maybe Goobertown can teach me something about like being on the other side of it. Now it's a 50-minute video. I don't think I'm going to watch it all, but they said 40k is not for casual players, and I've not watched it. I've had a skim through, I've listened to some odd bits, but I've not watched it all the way through. So anyway.
Welcome to Goobertown Hobbies. My name is Brent. I have a story for you today. So about a year and a half ago, my friends and I decided to run an escalation league for Warhammer 40k, and I thought this would be a great topic for a video. So
Escalation League, straight off the bat. Great time to play casually. Nobody knows what's going on. They buy a starter box and they play. That's casual gaming.
I think this Escalation League is a good introduction into the topic of different types of gamers, different types of players, and why we like some games but don't like others. And let's play that previously unseen video. Turn 1. Mark and Jim went first. I lost 49 of my 60 warriors during their first shooting phase. By the time I got to do anything this game, I only had 13 models left.
Yikes. Oh no. He's playing Admech in 9th edition. Do you remember? Do we all remember Admech in 9th edition as well? Famously 9,100 billion shots a turn.
On the bottom of turn 1, during our first chance to actually do something, we moved forward to look cool and take some objective.
Look at the state of those Wind Riders. They would have absolutely decimated.
And then we turned things back over to Mark and Jim. At the top of turn 2, I lost my 2 Archon leaders and 10 of the remaining Dark Eldar warriors. So at the bottom of turn 2, I had 1 Dark Eldar warrior left. Then she died at the top of turn 3. I've been trying for more than 20 years to like this game. The start of 8th was almost fun back in the simplified index days, but so far 9th edition has been kinda miserable. I'm not just talking about alpha strikes and balance issues either, I'm talking about all the special rules that slow everything down.
This is like a super skewed example because Admech at this time were actually mental. Yeah, like when we talk about this situation, I understand where he's coming from completely, but it's only made worse because of the armies he's playing against. He played against Admech twice, which in 9th edition were inherently bad. Like, bad for like a gameplay standpoint. Yeah, he could have made some better tactical decisions, but his commentary regarding like rules bloat is very valid, but it's exacerbated because of Admech.
Turn 40k is muttering to yourself as you stare at your dice tray and try to adjudicate your roll. The muttering goes something like this. Reroll 1s because unit is within 6 inches of my Archon and gets the Overlord aura. Set 6s aside for 1 extra AP because of Blade Artists of Camorra. 2s become 3s because I'm Cabal of the Black Heart, so it counts as turn 3 instead of turn 2 on the Power from Pain chart, so I don't get the Flensing Fury ability. No, I do get the Flensing Fury ability.
I totally agree with like the muttering at the book and the dice tray. That's something that I'd never considered before, but it's so true. It's so true. You're just there, roll a hit, right, this and this and this and this, and then I roll to wound, this and this, +1, rerolls. That's something I'd never really considered before. It's a conversation between your book and the dice tray. Such an interesting way to look at it. And like, I totally agree, it is just you and your dice tray.
So far, the core experience of this game seems to be looking back and forth from your rulebook to the dice tray while your opponent waits. It's minimal interaction with the game board, minimal interaction with your opponent, maximal interaction with the dice tray. Now, there was a 4th game in the series, and then after that, the league kind of fell apart for the normal reasons. There were work trips, Mark had a second child, congratulations. Unless maybe they kept going with the league and they just stopped inviting me. That is also a possibility.
Oh god, can you imagine? You know, we keep telling him to build his army bigger so he can win games. He's just painted more Cabalite warriors. Let's not invite him next time. Stop inviting Brent for his own sake. He kept paying exponential Cabalite warriors. Oh, it's like the pasta guy. Have you all seen the pasta guy? 10,000 eggs.
Egg yolks double every time, and for this batch, I figured I could use the help of Mr. Beast.
This is Brent, but Cabalite warriors.
By far, I was going to need a ton of help. Happy Egg.
Why it is that I haven't been able to enjoy the game of Warhammer 40k. I am a casual gamer, and Warhammer 40k is not for casual gamers. I love shopping for minis, I love painting minis, I like hanging out with my friends, I like seeing my friends' armies. Like, there are a lot of things I like about the idea of Warhammer that's why I keep trying to enjoy this game.
He's describing the problem that ostensibly Combat Patrol exists to fix, but it feels so lackluster compared to Spearhead now. Yeah, I totally agree. And this is also before like Combat Patrol was a thing, before Boarding Patrol was a thing. It's interesting because he's saying like he's casual, but he's very invested. Why do you have to have so many labels? Are you casual? Are you casually invested? Are you heavily casual invested? Are you competitive but not invested?
I think when it comes to 40k, I'm too much of a casual gamer. And now my definition for this is based on how many games I play per year. Normally averages out to like 2 or 3 games.
2 to 3 times a year isn't enough to keep up with the rules changes. Is exactly why I came to the conclusion, or had that idea of, if you don't play very often, keeping up with the updates is like, it's not worth it. You know, it's not. There's no point. I play probably once or twice a week, so that's 50 to 100 there. That's a lot. That's a hell of a lot.
So I want to play Magic Commander a couple times a year. I want to do one-shots for RPGs. A couple times a year, I want to dig into one of those computer games that I like. You can put them down for a year or 2 years and come back and kind of pick up where you left off.
I do kind of agree with that. I do actually really agree with the fact. I think that the nice thing about Magic, though, when you are playing casually, you're not thinking about what your opponent's deck does or anything like that. But what you are doing is only looking at a handful of cards at a time, right? And the basic premise stands. Put some lands down, play some cards out your hand. And I think 40k, the basic premise is put models on the board, put them on objectives and kill your opponent. But the method that you get there is always slightly different. Because in Magic, the method that you put cards down is the same. Deal with spells is the same. The text on the card is very much in front of you. You only have to think about 5 at a time. Whereas 40k is a lot more involved to get going straight away.
If a friend calls me up and says, hey, come on over, we'll do a one-shot for D&D, I may need to take 30 seconds to remember, wait, is that a D20 game or a D100 game? And then like, oh, okay, I got it. I remember, it's come back to me. I'm good. Let's go. Yeah, absolutely. I want to go and do a one-shot RPG. That sounds great.
That's another thing, another example of what I said, right? If you play 40k once every 6 months, two times a year or whatever, keeping up to date with the game, it's like you don't need to. But it's obviously there's the issue of finding someone else who doesn't care about keeping up to date as well, which is obviously something that I'm not really considered. D&D is a prime example. D&D is FAQ'd not quite as often as 40k. There's not quite as big of an overhaul each time they do. But D&D rulebooks are updated. They're on 5th edition. You know, they get FAQs, erratas and stuff like that. They change things. They change how things work all the time. As what I quickly learned when I started playing D&D is not everybody actually cares about the updates. They play the stuff they got in the book. They play with the book that they've got and they play with that. If there's something they don't understand, they might look it up. If there's something that doesn't quite make sense, they don't know how to resolve it, they might look it up. Most people just play with the player's handbook and the DM handbook and just call it a day. They don't think about this errata that got released. They don't think about these changes, these half races or whatever that got removed or whatever.
But if a friend calls me up and says like, hey, I know we haven't played Warhammer for a year and a half, but let's do it. This Saturday, come on over, we'll give 10th edition a try. No, that sounds terrible to me. That Escalation League that we just watched, that was 9th edition 40k. More than a year has elapsed, and there's a 3-year cycle of editions. So a 9th edition is gone, deleted, it's history, and now you need to obtain and learn the 10th edition rules.
Again, I do totally agree with this. I think Games Workshop's idea of a 3-year cycle is a bit too much. But I think maybe at the end of an edition, they could drag it out a bit more. But then again, you don't want it to get stale, so you do need to keep adding changes. The idea of an annual season, like the Leviathan mission pack to Pariah Nexus mission pack, is a bit too long, but I think the addition of 3 years is too short. I think maybe an edition could last 4 to 5 years, or even 6 years, and halfway through the edition, they could release or like halfway through, so this would be a 3-year cycle, the official 10.5 edition. In 2 years' time, they'd release like an updated version of 10, which is 10, but slightly different. It's got all of the rules changes, relaunching the core rulebook, maybe even reprint all the codexes or updated rules. The 3-year cycle is very cutthroat, and it is a shareholder thing. You remember PlayStation 2, right? Game comes out, they spend the next year and a half releasing DLC. Bam! Classic edition. I think that's where they need to be. They need to go, right, we've done all the codexes, we've done all the cards, let's relaunch the core rules, let's relaunch everything. If you've already bought all the DLC, you don't need it, but here's like a re-release, you know? Let's have this out for 18 months. Let's release new armies. Let's maybe even update armies, give them new rules, give Space Marines Codex 2, give whatever Codex 2. Maybe a second campaign run, because I think 3 years with like the constant rules changes and then a big rules change is a bit too much. I think they need a bit more of a grace period at the end.
Getting to the point where you can basically get through a game, like that's doable. That's, you know, reading a couple things in the rule book and watching a YouTube video, and then you can get through a game. To be at the level of understanding that it takes to actually enjoy a game, I think that takes a lot of work. That's the point, is that I am never past the learning curve on this game. This game has such a big learning curve, and I am never far enough along on that.
I can see where it's coming from. I think he said like he picks up Magic, like Magic Commander. I think that like has a similar vibe of like, if you don't know what your opponent's running, because like certain colors usually have a particular playstyle, you know. Green is usually getting loads of life, black is like lifesteal or whatever, and red is like a direct damage or whatever, and blue is control. If you play Magic super casually, you're not going to understand how someone's deck functions. You're going to have an idea of what it does. Orcs charge because they're orcs. Blue's control because it's blue. I can understand his frustration, and I can sympathize with his frustration, but I feel like, yeah, you might not know what every single unit of your opponent's army does, but you have an understanding of what the army functions. You're not going to have the same in like Magic, because that's something that you can also said you can jump in. This sounds like a narrative casual player getting stomped by a competitive one and complaining it's a rules issue. Yeah, I think from very little what we saw, so we don't really know what's going on, but the very little bit we saw, his opponents were playing to a higher tactical advantage than his. But a lot of his complaints weren't the fact that he lost loads of models, right? A lot of his complaints were the dice box, the understanding of like how rules are working, you know, like why is there so many different special rules? Again, it was a big 9th edition system. There's still a bit of that, but nowhere near as much. But it's like, why am I re-rolling ones? It's because this guy stood over there and he's got this thing that lets him do that. You know, it's just like weird. His arguments of why he's not enjoying the game aren't really coming down to, I lost all my models turn 1. It's coming down from, in my opinion, very valid points of the whole conversation with the dice train, the codex. You, the dice train, the codex, and not your opponent, where you're rolling to hit and wound. The rules layering, the rules overlapping. That is something that I can understand completely, because he's not really said, I've lost all my army turn 1 in the game. He did. We all watched it happen. It was hilarious. But yeah, that's ultimately not what's happened, which is actually quite refreshing, I would say.